So thanks for sitting down with me and doing this interview. I really wanted to touch a bit about mobile technology, where it's going for journalists, and maybe touch on other topics about the future of journalism. Um,
Sure.
so to give you a little bit of a background of myself, I'm starting a mobile app called LivePost,
Uh-huh.
which the intention is for it to become a real-time mobile news creation uh, platform or tool, and also distribution tool.
Uh-huh.
So that's the idea, and I just wanted to get a sense of where you thought this space was going.
Sure.
So let's just start off with the first question I had, and the first one was, sorry, they're calling me.
You're at? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the first one is, how do you think news organizations handled the web first strategy, and how are they handling mobile first strategy? Do they
Um,
think they're making?
Horribly and horribly, if you're talking legacy news operations, I think digitally native operations have handled it in a more in a bolder, more experimental approach, and that means a mix of success and failure. That's the essence of experimentation, is that we're going to make some mistakes, and we're going to learn from them, and as well as our successes. And I think that, but I don't think that legacy media, meaning certainly TV, newspapers, magazines, radio, but even to an extent, old digital like AOL and Yahoo,
Mhm.
probably have not been as bold and experimental as they should be in the mobile space. I did a post, and this might be why you asked me this question, or why I showed up on your list of people to talk to. But I noted in 2009, when web first was a bit of a buzzword in the news business, that's almost like fighting the last war. That it's time for us to be mobile first, and that's going on 6 years ago now, and I don't think many news organizations yet are mobile first. There are some exceptions, and not all of them are successful. Circa, I think, was a
Yep.
great experiment that didn't last. I'm hoping that AJ Plus and drawing a blank on the News Now kind of video project that one of my friends in New York is on. But I
Now
can't.
this.
What? Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think there's some interesting experimentation, but mostly it's not legacy news organizations. I think legacy news organizations, somewhat by their nature, are more timid and cautious
Mhm.
than experimentation requires.
Yeah, and I was actually reading that you made a PDF, Mobile
Yeah.
First Strategy PDF. I was reading that, and I had to go back to see what year you wrote that, because I thought
Well,
everything.
I did some research myself, because like the next year, Eric Schmidt, when he was CEO of Google, said in like February of 2010 or something like that, Eric Schmidt said Google needed to be mobile first, and I thought, okay, did I steal that from him? And of course, I used Google to find out that was his first mention of mobile first. So
Right.
I even beat Eric Schmidt to calling for mobile first strategy. So.
And you also beat Facebook's strategy for building out different apps,
Yeah,
not concentrating one on their main app. You
yeah.
mentioned that as well, so I was like, wow, this is really
and,
forbearing.
and nobody followed my advice. I might have good ideas, but I'm not good at persuading people to execute.
Yeah. So you touched on an interesting bit there. Who do you think is going to finally, nail news and media? Do you think it's going to be news organizations? Is it going to be, a tech startup? Who do you think it's going to be?
I think I think it'll be a mix. I think I'm very optimistic, and obviously personal relationships are part of this. But I'm a huge fan of Jim Brady as well as Chris Cruson, and I think that what they're doing at Billy Pan has some serious chance for success in showing both the value of finding your niche and of thinking mobile first. I mean, Billy Pan is definitely focused on mobile. And it's not a traditional news organization, but it's got a strong local emphasis. And I'm optimistic that Jim and Chris and their colleagues are going to find the right, both the right ways to engage the community on mobile, and then the right ways to make that work, from a business standpoint, profitably. But I think that some niches, I mean, there's no question that Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat have a huge hold on how people use mobile devices. Now, I think Facebook has some of the very worst mobile apps that I have experienced, which, given their resources and their audience, surprised me. And maybe it's that I expect something different of a mobile app than their core users, and so so I'm just wrong on that. Maybe I think they're successful in spite of themselves, but I could be wrong about that. They could be successful because their app works better for their target audience than it does for me. Snapchat, I'm just fascinated by, but I don't consider myself any expert in. In fact, I've really just recently joined. I initially, when I first heard of Snapchat, it was kind of portrayed as, this is something that young people can share private pictures on, and they vanished. And I thought, I heard it was big initially with high school students, and I thought, okay, there's nothing creepier than a middle-aged guy trying to, friend kids on Snapchat to try and figure out what its future is. And then various things were happening professionally and with my health that I used as excuses for not getting on. But I've gotten on recently and read a lot about it, and I'm thinking it's a great example of a challenge. Facebook and Twitter both evolved tremendously. I mean, obviously we all saw the movie of Facebook. Started out Zuckerberg and his friends rating girls, and now it's become Facebook. Yeah. And Snapchat has already evolved beyond that, but it's not a place you can link to your website because they don't even do links. But it's a place where you can be a player and provide news. They've already got a news vehicle, but how are you going to make money doing that? I think it's got tremendous marketing and advertising potential that nobody has yet mastered. Maybe some are experimenting with. But Instagram is older and somewhat similar. People are experimenting Instagram, but it also doesn't have links, so you can't drive traffic to your. So you got to figure out, how can we play in their field and make money? And some who like to control just aren't going to do it. Others are playing with Facebook and instant articles, and Twitter's looking like it's going to do something along those lines. And I think it's a fascinating time where those big social media players may become more either publishing platforms or actual publishers. Or you're going to find some people like, Billy Pan and AJ Plus and so on, who are going to, Vox, I think, would be a likely player to figure out, okay, here's how we succeed on somebody else's platform, as well as continuing our own platform, where we can monetize in different ways. But
Yeah.
I think it's really exciting to experimentation, and I think we're in a period of experimentation where we're probably going to see both on the part of startups and on the part of legacy media more failures than successes, but I think the failures will guide future successes.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned is that I'm guessing news organizations view social media more as a distribution platform than, right, than publishing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing still how many, and of course, as a distribution, it's almost exclusively Twitter and Facebook. Maybe they use LinkedIn a little. In fact, LinkedIn is kind of growing as a distribution platform, but it's, I think most of them have kind of evolved beyond the headline and link, but it's it's still a link and a social comment, a more social comment than a headline, but there's not so much engagement or, one of the things that I'm going to encourage my students here at LSU to do, students don't use Facebook. College students don't use Facebook as much, I think, as they're using Snapchat. And so there's a perception that Facebook is in decline. That we just got look at the numbers for the first couple of weeks, and Facebook's still a significant contributor.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, but if you look at our Facebook page, there's almost no comments or sharing or whatever. I think other people are sharing it somewhere else. And so I'm thinking, okay, do we need to, decide specific stories that we're going to post, not just on our own Facebook page, but reach out to an LSU sports fan page and say, hey, we've got an interesting piece here about this weekend's game with Auburn or something like that. Rather than just distribution, there's reaching out to niches and engaging with them, and ask a crowdsourcing question for a story that you're working on to one of those niche groups, whether it's a page or an open, public group or something. And then 3 or 4 days later, when you finish the story, you post the story there, and it's not like just this spam type of distribution that a lot of media distribution on Facebook has become, and that Facebook's algorithm treats it as. I did a post a while back, and if you haven't seen this, I can send the link. I was surprised a while back to find a Facebook post from one of my old company, Digital First Media, in my feed, and I thought, well, I don't really care about seeing their daily posts anymore. I should unfollow them. Basically pages that I can. So I had followed 3 or 4 dozen, and most of them I had seen nothing from in months. I was surprised that I followed them because Facebook's algorithm has decided Buttry's not interested in their stuff, and so it never shows me. And so I counted as one of their likes, but I was never ever seeing their content. And so I think being more engaging with fun stuff and conversational stuff. There was a woman when I was at Digital First named Marianne McLeod at the Macomb Daily. In fact, I'm wearing a Macomb Daily shirt right now. But Marianne was good at generating conversation, and she would post, and I blogged about this too, there was like a picture of an old drive-in movie theater that she just posted in their Facebook and said, who remembers the Horatio Drive-In Theater? There's no link or anything. It's just an interesting old picture. And like 13,000 people liked it, 5,000 commented on it, 4,000 shared it or something. I can't remember what the numbers were, but huge engagement. And, the distribution thinking would say, yeah, but what did you get from that? You didn't share a link. Well, what you got was the next time you shared a link, you showed up in those people's feed because they had engaged with you, and they might have clicked on those links. 200 more people that day liked the Macomb Daily, so they're going to get a shot even if they, go to the bottom of the algorithm because that's the only thing they ever engaged with. So I think being conversational and thinking about how people use social media is really important. That fire hose distribution just doesn't work. In Facebook, the algorithm kills you, And in Twitter, people just scroll past, but questions and retweets from their friends and those sorts of things and shares from their friends, that's what gets people to engage on Facebook.
And yeah, so mentioning like Twitter, Facebook, Periscope, Meerkat, all of those tools.
Yes.
Do you see the future of news being that fragmented, or do you think there's going to be like going back to that one newspaper that you grabbed every morning?
I think it is going to be fragmented. I mean, I think it was, the fragmentation, it goes back, before the internet to the advent of cable TV. When I was a kid, you got only one newspaper in your community. You were lucky if you got the New York Times or Wall Street Journal in addition, but who could afford that if you weren't, having your business pay for it? And really, they weren't. The Times at least wasn't that nationally distributed. Wall Street Journal always was, but so you got one newspaper. You had 3 commercial networks and PBS. That was it. And now we've got all this cable. Came along well before the internet, and so fragmenting was already happening and was going to happen. With or without the internet, and the internet has made it, that if I care about LSU football, I don't just have to read the Baton Rouge Advocate or the New Orleans Times-Picayune or their websites or the Daily Reveille. I can set up, a Twitter list of, ESPN and Tiger Rag and all of those legacy media that I mentioned, every TV station or whatever. And, they're all there on one, column on TweetDeck or one Twitter list I can check, or I can set up Google alerts. There's so many different ways that I can make sure that I get everybody. And if I really care about LSU football, I want that variety of opinions. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same thing, if I'm following, a particular political candidate or a social issue or a political issue, or, my wife is interested in, is doing needlepoint now, and if she wants to get needlepoint advice, why would she limit herself to one magazine that specializes in needlepoint when there might be half a dozen bloggers that do that? And so whatever your interests are, you can get multiple sources. And if your interest is community news, there's probably a blog in your community that may be covering your neighborhood at a level that your local newspaper never covered.
Yeah.
That it's not even trying to make any money. It's just that, what used to be that gadfly who went to the school board meetings is now kind of, reporting on the school board in his or her blog. And, you care more about that because your kid's in school than the local paper does because they cover so many schools. And, so you've got that opportunity to customize your news consumption in a way that no medium, I think, ever will. I think there will still be very successful. I'm delighted that the New York Times, is appearing to develop a successful business strategy, and I saw on Romanesco that their print paper was like 5.5 pounds Sunday, and I'm thinking, good, go. But the New York Times is not going to be anybody's sole national source anymore. Whether you get them in print or subscribe online or change browsers so you don't have to subscribe online. They're just going to be one of many sources. You're going to check NPR too, and Fox, and whatever ideological blogs you want to, whether it's Fox News or Talking Points Memo, depending on your political extreme.
Yeah. So do you think that news organizations have, the way I see it is that they kind of have a problem with scale. They can't cover everything, and social media can cover everything, but it's kind of messy. So
it is messy, but I think that I think that niches have always been have long been a developing part of media. That if you think of the magazine world, Time and Life and Newsweek and those sorts of things were very general interest. Sports Illustrated chose a niche and thrived on that for a good long time, and it's still surviving. I don't think it's thriving quite as much as it used to be because ESPN has been better at digital than Sports Illustrated, and as well as joining the magazine field. But also that people have, I think the development of media provided by non-media organizations is a fascinating development, like MLB.com and NFL.com, NBA.com, and so on. And I'm sure soccer and other leagues that I don't follow are figuring out, okay, we've got this opportunity to be media without just being PR. A sports writer who's covering a game for MLB.com produces to me as interesting a story as the local beat writers or ESPN or whatever. And I don't think, okay, this one over here is PR because it's owned by MLB. MLB gives them a level of independence that, first of all, aren't most beat writers at some, not most, there certainly are beat writers who are homers, and they're, even if they're not homers, they've got a very narrow interest that is either perfect for the fan or, if they don't engage you, maybe if they're not enough of a homer, you move on to somebody who is a homer and those sorts of things. So that the MLB affiliation with Major League Baseball, does not feel like, and I think genuinely isn't, PR. I think Major League Baseball has its PR arm, and then it's got MLB.com, which covers baseball for MLB. And so, I think that there's, that the development of niches, AARP has a media organization. Unfortunately, I'm not retired yet, so I don't know how good it is. I'm not a follower of it. I'm getting into their demographic pretty quick, but that isn't a PR arm of AARP. It's covering issues that are of interest to retired people, and certainly we're familiar with the niches of political coverage. But before I took my job at LSU last year, I got a very attractive offer from it was a PR agency that was interested in creating a media studio, in essence, a newsroom for a particular, for a particular manufacturer that would cover that as a news operation, not as PR. It would be separate from their PR operation and from their advertising operation, but it would be part of their media operation. And I don't know how that went because I took this job instead, but there's a whole lot of people getting into media beyond media companies, and I think that's going to make it important for media companies to be good at media and to identify niches they can be successful in and so on.
Yeah, and being part of the conversation, not getting left behind by the digital companies. So talking about your job at LSU, what are Are universities teaching students like monetization and more the business background of how to monetize the new age of media?
It, it, I think that is something that all journalism and mass communication schools are addressing and wrestling and dealing with. I think it will vary by school and by professor. I know we don't have an entrepreneurial journalism program at LSU, but it's certainly something we've discussed and might happen someday. But I was involved in teaching entrepreneurial journalism at both Georgetown and American universities when I was in the Washington, D.C. area, and Skyped into entrepreneurial journalism programs at a couple of other places, or emailed with people who are thinking about at least starting an entrepreneurial journalism class. Mm-hmm. So I know that's going on. My good friend Tim McGuire at the Cronkite School at Arizona State University teaches a course in the business of journalism. That I think there's always been, we've got a digital advertising department here. It's one of the four, sequences. I don't know department, but it's one of the four majors in our School of Mass Communication. But I think that the advertising has always been something that journalism schools taught, or affiliated with a business school to teach, or something like that. But advertising is just such a small part of monetization. It's the whole business model. It's the entrepreneurial mindset. It's developing revenue sources beyond advertising. Is there a pay for content model, which I think in addition to the very the kind of subscription based price the newspapers are dealing with, which I think beyond really specialized operations like the New York Times and Wall Street Journal, that hasn't been very successful. Mm-hmm. But you've got the possibility of, again, niche things. The Politico Pro costs something like $3,000, I think, is its lowest subscription. And so, if you're selling a subscription for $3,000, you're going to get very many, but you don't need very many to make it work. And, if you just do the math, if 535 congressional offices and that many more lobbyists or CEOs subscribe, you've got a successful business model. So I think, and so either you don't need to advertise at all and you can give them an ad-free experience, or you've got a very specialized, high-value audience to sell to, high-value advertisers, and those sorts of things. So that, I think it's way beyond just making and selling ads. It is business strategy. And, I think most journalism schools are figuring out where it fits and how do we teach it and who do we get to teach it. And because we're in a time when the people who are learning are out there in the field practicing and haven't learned it all yet, we're still learning that it's sometimes a challenge getting, that if you decide we're going to teach it, my friend Jeff Jarvis, who is in charge of the graduate program in entrepreneurial journalism at City University of New York, is I think one of the leaders in the field, but there's kind of he's got a challenge of how do I stay current. His entrepreneurial years were a few years ago, and so he's got to stay current by being connected with today's entrepreneurs, or he's not going to be successful. And I think he does stay connected and will be successful, but his own experience in entrepreneurialism is probably out of date, and so it's his connections that keep him successful in that field. And if you find somebody who has some entrepreneurial experience who's ready to move on to academia, you need to make damn sure that they stay current
Yeah.
because the field moves so fast.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. So I wanted to move on to two last questions. We're building a mobile app. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was, if you, from a journalist standpoint, if you could build an app, what would that app do, and what would it look like?
Let's start with two disclaimers, and that's that I suck at design, and I'm not really good at visual thinking, and so I would see an app and say, this is cool, better than I could tell you how to make that app.
Right.
But a few pieces of that are, it's got to be simple so that almost any app that's well designed, it is going to be easy enough for the early adapter to kind of play around and figure out. But there aren't many apps that can succeed based on just the early adapter audience. You need to be simple enough that the second and third wave of users are going to be able to figure it out and get at least the basic use. There might be some advanced things that they're never going to figure out, but who among us knows everything that our phone can do? And so it needs to be, it needs to be cool enough, do some things that nobody else can do, that the early adapters are going to say, OMG, this is great. And they're going to post on Facebook and Twitter. And after I see it, 5 or 6 times, I'm going to think, okay, I should figure that out. And it's going to need to be simple enough that in the second wave, I'm going to get some of that experience, even if I never get as deep into it as the early adapter. I think that because of the small screen and because of the fast lifestyle that people have now, that the first touch of any story or any content needs to be simple and short and give me the highlights. But I think that you can be really meaningful if you really catch my attention. If then I choose to go to a longer version, I can get the whole thing. My wife's a novelist, and there's a friend who read her novel on his iPhone, which just blows me away that somebody would read something that big on a phone. So I think you need something other than long news stories. You need short news bites. But if I'm fascinated, a long story behind that, I think, is a really good experience. I think that television stations shooting by standard shooting video. I mean, video is very big. I'm sure you know on mobile, but television video, both in terms of the length of the video and the size of the screen. Television developed this rule of thirds, where you cut the screen in 9 pieces, and you don't want to be in the center. You want to be on one of the sides, and those sorts of things. That's great for the big screen, but there are at least certain stories, if not all stories, that work better in mobile if you fill up the screen, because it's a small screen. And so I think figuring out what mobile video is best in terms of the screen and the time, and again, possibly a multiple layer thing, that if you've got the vine of 6 seconds or the 15 seconds, Instagram or Tout, and I don't even know how long Snapchat, is, but I know they're short too. Something that short that can be almost like a trailer, and click here, tap here if you want to see the longer version this video.
Yeah.
You know, I think that a mobile app, a mobile news app gives me the ability to browse short things and the ability to dive into deep things could be really successful, especially if it's developed for the small screen.